Welcome to the deep dive. We are jumping right into something today that I think, well, I know it affects you. All of us,
Oh,
really.
absolutely. It's unavoidable.
Right, because we live in a world that is just uncompromisingly obsessed with lightning fast solutions. Like, think about your default reactions. If you're driving to work and you get a flat tire, you do not pull over, sit by the road, and just ponder the existential meaning of the delay.
No, you definitely
You
don't.
pull out your phone, you call AAA, and you optimize the problem away immediately.
You want it fixed right then and there.
Exactly. Or, if you need an answer to a complex question, you don't spend hours doing nuanced research anymore. You just feed a prompt into ChatGPT.
And you get your answer in 3 seconds.
Right. You extract the synthesized answer, boom, done. We are so conditioned to eradicate any space between a problem and its resolution. Speed isn't just a preference anymore, it's the fundamental metric of competence.
It really is the default operating system. And that conditioning, it runs deep. The underlying assumption governing almost every interaction we have today is that faster equates to better.
Yeah.
And that seizing immediate control of a situation is the only rational way to navigate life. When you are constantly rewarded for quick reflexes and instant optimization, taking a step back looks suspiciously like failure.
It looks like you're dropping the ball. But that brings us to the core tension we are exploring today. What happens when the actual solution to a problem requires you to actively resist that exact conditioning?
Right? What if slowing down is the answer?
Exactly. What if the most effective, powerful move you could possibly make is to deliberately slow down? That is the mission for today's deep dive. We are unpacking a fascinating text titled Going Against the Grain, Divine Transformation Through More Time with God.
It's such a compelling read.
It really is. We're going to examine how moving deliberately, taking your time, and prioritizing time with God acts as a direct challenge to the hyper-fast, conformist pace of the modern world. It's so interesting to view slowness not as a disadvantage, but as a deliberate, divine strategy.
Yeah, we're really looking at a highly specific challenge here. The text asks this foundational question. How do you yield control to God when the entire world around you is frantically scrambling to take control of their own narratives?
That is a tough spot to be in.
It's incredibly tough. To understand it, we have to look at the severe psychological friction of nonconformity. Human beings are deeply social creatures, so that everyone around you is moving at warp speed, operating on one accord, rushing toward the exact same collective milestones.
Choosing to take your time feels wrong.
It feels inherently dangerous. It triggers a literal survival response. Standing still in a sprinting crowd feels like a bold, almost aggressive maneuver, even if you aren't doing anything at all.
Because everyone is bumping into you. It feels like you're making a fatal error simply by refusing to panic.
Right.
If the herd is running, every biological instinct tells you that you should be running too. So how does a person realistically counter that intense urge to blend in and speed up?
Well, the source material offers a very specific antidote. The thesis isn't just, to meditate or practice generalized mindfulness. The answer is to spend more time with God.
And the emphasis there is really heavy on the volume of time, right?
Exactly. You have to spend more time engaging with God than you spend engaging with the fast-paced world. That way, divine time actually overrides the frantic influence of everything else. It has to become your primary baseline.
The mechanics of how that influence shifts are so crucial. It's essentially a matter of exposure. The less time you spend consumed by the world's frantic pace, the less power it has to dictate your internal rhythm.
That's spot on. Conversely, the more time you spend anchored in the divine, the more you begin to comprehend divine movement. You start asking foundational questions instead of just reacting.
Like, why does God move in this particular way?
Right. Or why does this specific process require a slower pace here, but a faster pace over there? You develop a specialized wisdom and a deep internal rhythm long before you attempt to make any external changes to your life. You're basically calibrating your internal clock to a completely different time zone.
I love that. And to ground this whole abstract concept of filtering out worldly influence, the text presents this powerful case study.
The hair journey.
Yes, it details the author's deeply personal journey of learning to love their natural black hair. This operates as a tangible, real-world application of divine transformation.
Because she was living in an environment that actively demonized it?
Completely rejected it. It was not accepted in its original state at all.
Yeah.
So the author experienced this clear divine pull regarding their authentic identity and physical presentation, but that divine vision was in hostile opposition to the surrounding environment.
Which is the ultimate test of going against the grain.
How do you hold on to a divine vision of yourself when your physical reality is constantly demanding that you conform?
You have to manufacture your own exposure therapy. The vision was to wear her hair naturally, free from the manipulation required to appease the people around her. But establishing that new reality requires visualization.
Right, you need a picture of it.
Exactly. When your immediate society disdains a specific image, you have to create a new normal. So she did this by searching through women's magazines. Now, these magazines heavily favored the dominant conformist culture, but she managed to find a single image of a black woman with a small, natural afro.
Just one image. And what she did with that single image is basically the blueprint for this entire process. She cut that picture out of the magazine and taped it directly onto her wall.
It seems like such a small analog action.
But it serves as this massive psychological anchor.
It really does. Putting that cutout on the wall is a perfect metaphor for the broader requirement of divine transformation. It represents placing the image of God, the divine blueprint for your life, squarely in your mind, your heart, and your psyche.
You are taking an image that the world rejects and placing it in a position of authority in your own space.
Yes, and you don't even need to worry about perfectly embodying that image on day one. The initial goal is simply to look at the divine image until it stops feeling foreign. You just gaze at it continually, filtering out the external noise and judgment, until this newly introduced image becomes your undisputed personal norm.
Because if you don't establish that deep internal comfort with the divine image, you will just collapse the second you step outside.
Oh, instantly.
The author points out that your personal norm is rarely going to match society's norm. When you travel, when you enter different rooms or switch environments, the world's baseline is going to shift constantly.
If you lack a self-regulating dependency on your own internal norm, you'll constantly morph to fit whatever room you walk into.
Which sounds exhausting.
It is, if you're the only person in a room operating on a divine timeline. Just as you might be the only person in a room with a specific physical characteristic, you will feel an overwhelming urge to flee or hide unless that internal baseline is rock solid. You have to get deeply, unequivocally comfortable with the image on the wall before you can ever hope to wear it in public.
And this transitions beautifully into the requirement for private, unseen transformation. I think we often think of going against the grain as this loud, public declaration of independence.
The big reveal.
Right, the big dramatic reveal. But the text argues that true transformation happens in strict secrecy first.
It's all behind closed doors.
The author describes being so bound up by the societal hatred of their hair, which had morphed into this deep, internalized disdain, that they would wear a head wrap even when sitting completely alone in their own bedroom.
That detail is so telling. It exposes how thoroughly the world's fast-paced, judgmental norms can infiltrate and infect our most private spaces. We police ourselves even when nobody is watching.
We really do.
But the actual work of transformation began when the author started taking the scarf off in the privacy of her own room. It was restricted entirely to that safe space. If she had to go outside, the scarf went back on to shield herself from the judgment. But behind that closed door, she practiced walking past her own mirror and simply getting comfortable looking at her raw, unfiltered reflection.
And it's not a passive exercise either. Practicing seeing yourself requires intentional physical and mental adjustments. You aren't just staring at the mirror hoping to feel better. You have to change your physical posture to match the divine transformation that is trying to take root inside you.
The connection between the physical body and the internal state is vital here. When God is transforming you internally, perhaps calling you to step out of a lifelong struggle with low self-esteem and into a posture of bold authority, your physical body must align with that new reality.
The instructions in the text are highly specific about this.
Very specific. Your shoulders cannot point down. You cannot stare at the floor. You must stand completely straight. You must look up. You must consciously choose to smile at your reflection rather than defaulting to a frown of dissatisfaction.
And the internal monologue has to be rewritten simultaneously. The text highlights the necessity of replacing the endless loop of self-criticism. The running list of things you need to fix, hide, or alter with definitive I am statements.
You're actively overriding the old programming. The mental posture holds equal weight to the physical posture.
So the core application for you, listening to this, is recognizing that genuine transformation is strictly a behind closed doors operation in its infancy.
You must fully, unapologetically accept the divine change internally before anyone else in the world is allowed to witness it. You have to reach a level of private mastery where if someone were to unexpectedly walk into your bedroom, your immediate reflex would not be to scramble, hide, or revert to your old acceptable self.
You have to own the transformation in private before you can defend it in public.
Exactly.
But once that private foundation is solidified, how do you manage the transition into the public sphere? I mean, you've spent the time with God, you've rewritten the internal monologue, your posture is set, but stepping outside is still a massive shock to the system?
It is, which is why the text tracks a very calculated progression here. The author didn't rip off the head wrap and march into a crowded shopping mall on the first day.
That would be a disaster.
It was a strategic, phased expansion of the radius. The first step was merely walking out of the bedroom and stepping into the hallway to be seen by the people she lived with.
It's a deliberate, step-by-step rollout of the new identity.
And after mastering the hallway, the progression moves to the bolder step of walking out the front door to the mailbox, exposing the transformed self to the neighbors. This phase introduces the inevitable reality check.
A pushback.
Showcasing your transformed self and publicly going against the grain is guaranteed to generate friction.
The author specifically notes the psychological weight of the hallway test. The housemates seeing her hair were the exact same individuals who had previously made negative comments and contributed to her internalized shame.
It's just terrifying.
But because she had spent so much time establishing that new internal norm in private, she possessed the fortitude to let them look, internally deciding that their opinions simply did not dictate her reality anymore.
We really have to acknowledge the tangible cost of that boldness, though. When you present this newly transformed, divinely paced version of yourself, you are going to experience loss.
Yeah, that's a hard truth.
Friends, family members, or professional colleagues who relied on your old, frantic, conformist self may not be able to handle the change. Some people need you to operate at their frantic speed to validate their own choices. When you refuse to do that, you will lose them.
While others will eventually adjust and shift to accommodate your new baseline, but you have to be fully prepared for that initial fallout.
The reward for enduring that fallout, however, is profound. The text describes the experience of finally walking to the mailbox, feeling the wind hit her natural hair, and experiencing a total lack of concern for the judgment of others.
Which is true freedom.
It leads to this brilliant, highly memorable visual regarding how you interact with the unpredictable elements of the outside world once this transformation is complete.
The dog.
The metaphor of the neighborhood dog, it perfectly illustrates this shift in authority.
Let's paint that picture. Imagine you are walking down the street. Under your old, frantic, people-pleasing paradigm, you might have cautiously avoided certain houses, cowered, or shrunk down to make yourself a smaller target.
Right, playing it safe.
But as this newly transformed, divinely anchored version of yourself, your physical and mental posture is completely different. If a dog comes running aggressively up to you, the new you does not cower.
You do not retreat.
You stand up perfectly straight. By refusing to shrink, you actually confuse the dog. You know exactly who you are, and you refuse to adopt a posture of fear just because something loud is running at you. You might even turn the tables and chase the dog.
You have internalized the knowledge that shrinking down is permanently removed from your behavioral repertoire.
That visual captures the essence of neutralizing external pressure so well.
When you invest the necessary time with God, deliberately taking your time to forge a divine norm, you simply stop reacting to the frantic, aggressive energy of the world. You hold your ground.
The dog in this scenario represents any unexpected high-pressure demand from the outside world that expects you to default to panic.
And the pressure itself becomes confused because you're no longer playing by the established rules of anxiety and retreat.
That structural shift in how you respond to pressure sets up the final overarching framework the text uses to explain this way of living. It frames this divine transformation through the lens of the 1% versus the 99%.
This framework really crystallizes the entire concept for me. Consider the financial 1% of the world. They do not reject their standard of living, nor do they carry guilt simply because the other 99% of the globe operates under different constraints.
They aren't apologizing for their reality.
Not at all. The 1% do not sit in boardrooms agonizing over whether they should downgrade their resources to blend into the majority. Their reality is simply their baseline norm.
Yeah.
If the majority of people don't understand their operational pace or their resource allocation, they are unbothered. The 1% will never voluntarily downgrade their existence merely to achieve conformity.
And the source material applies this directly to your life. God is inviting you into a divine 1%. This path of slowing down, of deliberate movement, of profound internal transformation. It is an exclusive, highly beneficial operational baseline.
It is a massive upgrade.
But the central caveat is this. You cannot access or sustain the benefits of this unique path if you are simultaneously exhausting yourself trying to blend in with the 99% of the world that is spinning out of control at lightning speed.
You are required to go against the grain of the 99%. But maintaining that posture cannot be achieved through sheer human willpower. The ultimate conclusion of the text is that to comfortably inhabit that 1% reality, to sustain that divine nonconformity without breaking under the pressure, you must spend your time with the provider of that lifestyle.
You must spend your time with God.
Exactly. If you desire to live a divinely anchored life while the rest of the globe is defined by a frantic reactive pace, your primary investment of time must be with the creator of that divine pace.
So, drawing all of these threads together for you as you navigate your own environment today, what this material demands is a series of deliberate, conscious choices.
It's an active process.
You have to actively curate your visual and mental influences, much like cutting that image out of the magazine and forcing it to become your new baseline. You must be willing to endure the isolation of private transformation, correcting your physical posture and your internal dialogue behind closed doors when absolutely no one is clapping for you.
Because nobody sees that part.
Nobody sees it. And finally, you have to be willing to step out, stand remarkably straight, and confuse the external pressures that expect you to shrink, even when the rest of the world is rushing by.
It's a demanding but deeply clarifying process. And I want to leave you with a final concept to mull over as you step back into your day, one that builds on the foundation of this text.
Yeah. Oh, let's hear it.
We have been thoroughly conditioned to interpret taking our time as a sign that we are falling behind. We constantly label slowness as a deficit. But consider the possibility that the delay you are currently experiencing in your life is not a setback, a punishment, or a failure.
Oh, wow.
What if that slowdown is the precise, mandatory incubation period required to forge a version of yourself that is structurally sound enough not to shatter when the world inevitably pushes back?
That reframes the entire concept of waiting. It turns it from a passive punishment into an active, essential preparation. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope it provided the exact clarity you needed today. Until next time, take your time.